All right, well, let's get started. I have 10:05. I'm Chris Colvin. I'm the founder of In the House. We're an organization dedicated to supporting networking and career success for in-house counsel. We're delighted today to have as our speaker Sali Osman. Sali is a board advisor and a leading chief information security officer, or CISO. Sali has worked in many companies and industries ranging from GE Capital to Saudi Aramco and many other clients. In her life, Sali has bridged many gaps in her life and her career. She was a Nubian minority within her native Sudan and Egypt. She was a Muslim immigrant to the United States. And she's a woman in a male-dominated tech industry, just to name a few of the many bridges that or gaps that she has bridged. Today, Sali will be here with us sharing her experiences and her views on another important gap that we as in-house counsel need to bridge, and that is one between CISOs and GCs, and even more generally between technical information security professionals and in-house counsel at all levels. Bridging gaps is hugely important to us at In the House. We were actually created as a way to make it easier for in-house counsel to connect. I personally believe that the legal industry has been dominated by large law firms for a long time. I don't have anything against large law firms, but I think that in-house counsel are the people that really need to come together and lead our industry. I view them as the buy side of the industry, and as such, they should really be determining how legal services are delivered and ensuring that legal services are actually tailored to serve the corporate objectives of the client side of our very large business. So without further ado, I'd also like to introduce David Heckler. David is the co-chair of our cybersecurity working group, and David will be doing most of the Q&A with Sali after she makes her presentation. So Sali, why don't you take it from here? And let me mention again, for those that joined late, I may be muting all. You can always unmute yourself to ask a question. And the mute is the mute and unmute looks like a microphone icon in the lower left-hand corner of your Zoom window. So thank you, Sali, for being with us today. And we really appreciate your time and your appearance here.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be with this great intellectual group. Definitely looking for an interactive discussion. I am actually not only I work in disruptive technologies, I'm also known as being a disruptive speaker, meaning I don't do traditional lecturing. I mean, I can, my kids and my husband say that I do that very well all the time, but this is not the place or the medium for that. I think people generally learn more with interaction and asking questions and interjecting, even if you feel like, hey, my question may not be that relevant, but it's bothering me, let me ask the question. Feel free to do so. We can always say, we can discuss it further offline. What we would, when David and I were talking a couple of weeks back about the gap, like how can a CISO help the general counsels? And one of the questions I asked is the first thing that came to my mind is, you mean internal ones, or do you mean like in big corporates or when they get retained? And I found interesting enough that it doesn't matter really. Apparently there are gaps regardless. I guess because first of all, they speak different terminologies. Usually the technology, and when we refer to CISO, we mean, it doesn't really matter the title. We're specifically talking, it can be sometimes they call it Senior VP of Information Assurance. Some people call it Senior VP or Executive VP of Information Technology Security, or I guess you understand the point. We're talking about whoever is responsible in the organization for technology risk and compliance, okay? And that means that type of position generally comes in. If you look at the background, where does that, who comes to that position? Usually the people who come to these positions are either senior managers who have who come from a networking security background, or they used to be the technical managers, technical directors. And so generally speaking, they're more of a technical people. And our great general counselors are actually people, not only the fact whether they're inside or outside, it doesn't matter, in my opinion. It's actually, they're people who they don't speak technical terms, they don't use technical jargon. One of the questions I would like to ask our audience, we have about 9 participants, including myself. If you could take a minute and answer the question of the poll, if we can.
Should I launch that? Yep. Okay, I'll go ahead and launch it.
Question.
Very short. It's just I don't know if we can take them separately. Let me launch the poll and see. I've done a few of these, but.
Oh my God, are they going to cheat, you mean? No.
No. I just mean when you said take the first question, it may be that we
Yes.
launch the poll and they
Yes.
do both. I don't know if we can aggregate the results.
It's okay. We can. So So as an in-house counsel or outside attorney, how often do you meet with your clients, cybersecurity technical professionals? And that includes the person who writes the security policies, the person who conducts the security assessments. How often do you meet with them? Do you meet with him daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually? Or you can specifically say, excuse you, whom are you talking about? Who's that person? I've never seen that person in the company. And then the answer would be never. And when you're done with that question,
can we ask them just to do both, Sally? I probably wasn't clear. Why don't we answer
I would
them
like
both
you. No, that's fine.
Because we're not going to be able to
like
view the results until we do both, which is
no, that's fine.
Okay.
When you're done with that, I would like you to answer the second question, which is, generally speaking, so we're trying to be very general. We're not trying to put anyone on the spot. And by the way, these answers are anonymous, so we're not going to know what you said or what you answered. We're not going to say, oh, you know what, Kathy put that. We don't know. How effective do you think the partnership between the general counselors and in-house lawyers and the one hand and cybersecurity technologies on the other hand? Do you call it effective? Do you guys work in very dynamic environments where everyone knows what they're doing, you're always collaborating, or somewhat effective? You know, when we have an incident, we talk. Yeah. When we get called by law enforcement, guess what? They send us an email. Or is it minimally effective? You know, once in a blue moon, ineffective. It's dysfunctional and needs a lot of work. This is actually, in my opinion, is a good posture to be in. The fact that you realize that it's not effective is actually 50% of the problem, in my opinion, and I'll tell you why. Potentially disastrous, meaning that you don't even know his name, actually. You don't even know the title. You don't know who does this job to begin with in the company. And probably same thing to you. They don't know you either. So please submit your answers.
And let me urge everyone to try to vote because even if it doesn't fit neatly into your area, give it the best answer that you can. That way we can
elaborate on the chat, please, or raise your hand and feel free to talk.
So I can close the vote soon. It looks like only half have voted though. So if you can, I'm going to give everyone another like 30 seconds and encourage you just to vote and pick the best answer.
I don't think they believe you, Chris, when you tell them that it's going to be anonymous. I think these people think that
that's probably a good skeptical cybersecurity. when the poll does evaporate once the call is over. So
yeah, right.
Well, Chris, you're not voting. Sally, you're not voting. I'm not voting.
So that's 3 out of 9.
We did all right then. I'm going to end the poll.
Yeah.
Let's see. how things look. So go ahead, Sally. Can you see the poll results, Sally?
Let's look at the results. Where is hand to talk? Mr. Rabu? Someone wants to talk. Mrs. Rabu.
Oh,
Hi, we can see you. Go ahead.
Hi. I think you're onto a problem, but I think it's getting better, and I'll tell you why. There are a number of groups, primarily women in e-discovery. That's a start. Where the administrative people who do most of the day-to-day work in law firm corporations have an opportunity to meet 3-4 times a month and to learn the cyber side of things. And I think there are increasingly more opportunities. I think perhaps in-house companies just need to encourage their workers who are at risk, the highest risk factor, to go out and interact with these organizations.
Yep.
The other thing I'm going to say is that even within the cyber companies and within the tech space, the workers in the tech space don't even think of the legal ramifications of what they're doing. And so they should know better, but they're not doing better. I mean, I just had an experience this week where I was speaking with a hosting company, and they were sharing passwords to a user's cPanel via email, which I don't think was encrypted. So I think the problem is with management. I think management needs to have rules on the importance of cybersecurity. I think they also need to encourage the very technology people themselves who are doing the work, who usually are millennials. So they tend to be a little bit more open. They haven't got the life experience to know that they've got to be careful. And they know what good tech is, and they think that that's all that matters. I think that's where a lot of the education needs to come from, and then encourage the newer people coming into the corporation to be just better educated on the risks of open source technology, because a lot of what's happening on the internet now is open source. So I think it's both sides.
Agreed. And that's exactly what we want. Thank you so much for your explanation. And the reason what we wanted to do with this poll is the next step is when you're coming in, you're probably asking the right questions. You're probably looking for, okay, you know what, let's meet weekly. And you brought a very good point, which is e-discovery. Generally speaking, the good e-discovery programs are the programs that start before an incident, before an actual investigation, meaning the framework and the process needs to be in place in the organization. They know whom to call, they know how to preserve the evidence and the logs, they know what to do with HR. So everyone in the company, including HR, the hiring managers, the technology security teams, and attorneys, all are speaking the same language. They all agree on the process, they know what they're doing. And this is what we would call a mature relationship, because the actual engagement and understanding and explanation starts before an issue happens. If anyone here have been in a cyber attack or a compromise, even at fault compromise, not necessarily an attack, or a compromise of data, unintentional or intentional, you may probably very well aware how serious and how chaotic the situation becomes. And we don't have the time to sit and get to know each other and what does the law says in that type of data, or they don't have time, the attorneys don't have time to understand, oh, what does it mean that the passwords were unencrypted? Or what do you mean that they were in the cloud? What do you mean in the cloud? Oh, they were actually outside of the country, you know, and and you try to explain to that's not the time where you need to explain to an attorney when an incident happened. This is not the time where you need to explain to an attorney where the data is. Same thing. This is not the time where you need to, as an attorney, to explain to the technology officers or the security officers that their whole data life cycle is potentially illegal right from the bat. The fact that the way they're collecting the data, the way they're processing the data, how they're distributing and sharing the data, whether they're actually selling it, sharing it for money or without money, how they're deleting it, and how often do they delete it, how long do they keep it, the data retention, and all of that. There needs to be a talk beforehand. The results of the poll came out, and thank you so much for that, Chris. What I actually like is that 50% said that they actually meet weekly, and 50% said that it's somewhat effective. I'm very happy to see that no one voted potentially disastrous in the second question, and no one actually said that they never met. So at least they know the name of the person. That makes me feel better. Okay.
Good. I'll stop the share on the poll.
Thank you. So
this is Kathy Mulrow-Petty, and I apologize for not sharing my video. My house is under construction. I agree with you. I think it's a cultural issue in many corporations, and it needs to be, cybersecurity needs to be part of the culture from the beginning of product development to the end of the process. So lawyers like me don't come in when there's an incident and we look at everything and said, okay, how do we get around these things that we shouldn't have been doing? So if you get everyone involved as you build the products, as you build your systems, as you build your platforms, including the attorneys and the privacy attorneys, and I think that's a really first step for everything as well. So I see it as a partnership with the technology teams, and I've been lucky because in my history, I've really been able to partner with the teams I've worked with.
Yeah, I admit I was one of those lucky people too. In my previous examples, actually one, I used to head a committee, and I used to have representation from HR, risk and compliance, which is the Sarbanes-Oxley SOX office, and the attorney and attorneys and the HR. And honestly, with all of that, I don't think between like all of our minds, I don't think we've had anything falling into the cracks. Any issue, including whether we decide to move data centers, whether we decided to offshore or bring back shore services, technology services, anything that you could think of, whether we even writing SLAs. One of the areas I think that's very critical, and actually let me bring the first slide. Let me share the slide. Okay.
Are you having difficulty? There it goes. Okay.
No. So one of the, just like we said, and this is the conclusion I want all of us to reach before we bring up the slide, is that there are responsibilities on both ends. So this is not a roundtable discussion to say, oh, you know what, we hammer ourselves, yeah, attorneys need to do better. You know, they need to start learning technology. No, they're not. I don't think it's the job of an attorney or anyone who's non-technical to be technical to understand cyber. That's not true. I think cyber is a risk. It's a way to describe technology risk, period. And that technology risk, how it actually poses itself to the business. And I think, this is just my personal opinion, anyone in technology who's not able to articulate how security risks affect the business, then that's an issue right there. That's why you see that in the left, I started with the CISO responsibilities. I think that you always, as a CISO, you need to invite the general counsel to meet your compliance and risk committee, always. If they don't have a formal committee, then schedule those periodical meetings. And guess what? So you're going to tell me, well, but I never got an invitation. Then please don't sit and wait for the invite. Please go and invite yourself to the technology officer, security officer, and say, hey, by the way, I am the new general counsel. Can you please educate me a little bit about your policies? What are you guys doing to help me understand your environment? When you start talking to them at this step right there, you're going to see at the other side, you're going to discover that a lot of the security folks do not realize the assets, the criticality of the assets that they're sitting on, whether it's an infrastructure, if they're providing services to other clients, or they are managing data and handling data, sensitive data on behalf of customers and clients. And then this becomes your role to say, okay, let me talk to you about the new regulations that's going on. We are having this regulation coming up. The EU GDPR is a good example. I think the EU GDPR was one of what I think between Sarbanes-Oxley and EU GDPR, I think it evolved. I mean, obviously for the publicly held companies, what I would call the relationship, it helped maturing the relationship between technology risk, security folks, and the attorneys.
Sally,
yeah.
I just want to jump in on time. We have about 20 minutes left, and I
Yes.
just time is flying, so I just want to make sure if you want to reserve time for Q&A.
Yes, please. Absolutely. And then one of the other things I would like to emphasize on is that although we have the expectation that the CISO involves you before writing a policy, while they're writing a policy, they should involve legal. While they're writing any kind of a service level agreement or any contract or any third party relationship, I think legal needs to be involved. And guess what? If they're not doing that, then your job becomes as a general counsel, ask for these templates. Hey, what is the template that you are using for service level agreements? What type of, if they give audit rights for their clients, what is the non-compliance terms on those audit language? Did you as an attorney review those? Okay. Insurance policies, did you review those? These are the critical things that I would say. They think it may sound like a technical issue, but I really think it's a joint effort. We expect also the general counsel to be involved in the life cycles of data and assessments. Also, from time to time, just have a look at the risk register and see what risks does the company, I don't want to use the word struggle, but may face or in the horizon that they already identified. Identified risks is a major, I call it a golden gate. It introduces you to a lot of issues and potentials that you may not be able to see. And they probably found it as a security assessment or a gap that may end up being more of a bigger legal issue. Next slide.
I think that's actually the second one.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Now, so let's say you're an outsider, okay, and you've been retained. Either something happened, an incident happened, or whatever. What do you do? I mean, here you are, a new person to this organization. I mean, hopefully you understand the industry well, which most attorneys are hired because they have an industry background on the business. I would recommend look at the policy governance, not just review the policies. What does policy governance mean? I mean, who's writing the policy? Who's reviewing it? Who's approving it? Who's disseminating those? And who's updating those? And from there, you will start realizing, okay, does everyone need to be involved as there? Or is it a one-man show? Is there a potential conflict of interest that the person who is supposed to be regulated is the person signing on the policy? These are the questions I would ask if you're coming from outside. And always look for the policies that are directly affecting the regulatory universe of the organization. So if it's a medical, anything that has to do with medical data, for example, a doctor's office, but not limited to that, like a lot of these diet places are actually nowadays started to carry. I mean, they're keeping the blood pressure, the sugar level, weight, and name and date of birth, and that actually ended up being HIPAA. Although they didn't mean to, all what they wanted to do is weight watching and weight management programs, but they ended up being into HIPAA. Inform those folks, the technology and security officers, and hopefully please inform them in writing. And this is not only to protect yourself, but also to confirm that this is not a casual discussion. I mean, you can bring it to them in the break room when you see them, but always send an email and follow up and say, hey, we have a gap in this issue. You know, we have this issue. We found out about that. Where are you guys with this effort? And make sure it gets fixed and get a date from them. And if it doesn't get fixed, feel free to escalate. And escalation means, you know, depending of course on the seriousness of the issue, to the right people. And I'm sure you guys, some regulated industries, you actually have I don't know if you guys have any mandated reporting requirements, but in security, we actually do have some of we are mandated reporters on certain issues. With that, I would open it for questions.
Do you want to stop the share, Sally, so we can see each other?
Well, I guess hearing an opportunity here. First, this is David Heckler. I'm the editor-in-chief of Cyber and Security, the Google newsletter. And the article that we featured Sali Osman in is in your chat window now. The link to it is in your chat window, so you can find it yourself pretty easily.
And I can screen share it too, if that's helpful to people.
Okay. And our site is at legalblackbook.net. All one word, legalblackbook.net. But Sally, you know, you mentioned the EU's General Data Protection Regulation. Is this the May 25th effective date of that new legislation? Does this present an opportunity for General Counsel and the technology team, the CISO in particular, to actually sit down and talk? I mean, obviously they've been, the GDPR has been in the works for 2 years. They probably talked about it before if they haven't. But does this give them an opportunity to really try and work through how things are going right now?
Yes, and I think the regulation, when it specifically said, and I know a lot of people can agree and disagree about that you need to have a chief privacy officer. I mean, I know some people were screaming like, oh, that's not a necessity. Well, I think, and I don't want to reiterate what the law says because that's not my job, but let me tell you how I understood it. It meant that have someone to be responsible for the regulatory data requirements. I mean, it can be the CISO if you want, that's fine. I mean, he can, that's not an issue, but I think the fact that they wanted to give a full-time person, I think it's a great and needed step. Me being in this industry for more than 20 years, I don't want you to start guessing my age. I'm not gonna, I'll leave it here. This is a very important step because not until that person started to coming into organizations, people started to ask the question, oh, so what do we do? You need to do an impact, a privacy assessment. Oh, what does that mean? It means that you need to go through all of your systems and see where the data are. What? We need to do that? Why? Are you talking about inventory? But we have a data invent. And they started to go back and forth. And not until that person started to explain what that regulation meant and explained it to them in technical terms, saying, okay, we need to go through these systems and make sure these data, and other companies started to complain because they ended up with data classification exercises, expensive ones, but that was needed anyway. But I think that, yes, to answer your question, David, I think it was a great way to have, in my opinion, to bridge the gap too.
Yeah, Sally, can I ask a two-part question?
Sure.
I think you touched on both these areas, and they're areas that I find relevant to the discussion. So, first question is one of lingo or terminology.
Mm-hmm.
The second is culture of secrecy. So, with terms of lingo, seems to me, and I'm going to analogize my field. I come from an IP background. So IP spent a long time kind of at the kids' table in legal departments. People didn't understand it. They didn't know what to do about it. And it took years and years until this sort of hybrid group of professionals arose that were both engineers and lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
and were able to bridge that gap, to use your language. So I'm interested in your views on whether that hybrid class of professionals is emerging, because I think we need more than just people talking. I think we need a actual bridge, that is, people that are comfortable in both worlds. And again, we have that in IP, but we didn't in the early days of IP. The second one is there's two communities here, both of whom have a strong culture of secrecy. No cybersecurity professional wants to publicly air their horrible situations. And so I'm convinced that the breaches we hear about are just the tip of the iceberg, and that there's constant problems in lots of companies of all sizes. And then lawyers, of course, have their own culture of secrecy. So they tend to circle the wagons, both groups, and have a very closed group, an inner circle, and they don't share with other people. So we need both a change in, I think, how people are trained. So we have these hybrid people, and we also need, how do we break those circles, that culture of secrecy? So I don't know if you agree with the premises, but do you have any thoughts on those two issues?
Yes, on the first one, did you say IT, like information
IP,
technology?
intellectual property.
That's what I thought, yes.
Yep.
Actually, back many days when I was younger, when I always dreamt to be an attorney, anyway.
You dodged a bullet.
There wasn't this gap. You're right. We had a lot of people who were specialized in intellectual property, and this is actually how they went into law. It's funny because my daughter, she's an artist, she's into music, and she was like, "Mom, I know what to do for college." Like, oh, she's 17. So what do you want to do? I want to be an attorney in the media industry, so that I make sure that all these artists, their rights are being met. I'm like, okay. And she changes her mind when politics doesn't go well, and Congress has issues, and Senate discussing something, then she wants to study political sciences. So you know what's going on in this house. So to answer your question, yes, I think generally speaking that there needs to be more what we would call an interdisciplinary programs in universities, and some universities are actually doing that better than before. And even in medicine, I mean, now we are appreciating so much medical professionals who are into health management, who understand how to, not only to understand the business, but also understand the IT side of the business and how to manage, because for you to manage these systems, you have to understand IT. So that's actually like 3 disciplines in one. And then you have the, my favorite, which is the bioinformatics. Now you're actually asking the microbiologists to start doing data and data sets using code. I think that's great. Same thing for what I would love to see more is training and having the universities, whenever they're prepping what I would call the pipeline for a chief privacy officer, then he needs to have the requirement of an information technology undergrad and then her or his law degree. The second part of your question, which is the secrecy, they always talk like, they're protecting the national secrets of the United States of America. I mean, with all due respect, that's true. But to whom, for God's sake? I mean, you have your data offshored anyway. I mean, why do you think your attorney two offices down from you shouldn't know that you had a security incident, even if it's minor? What I've done in the past, whenever I had a security incident, no matter how less important it is, I used to send an email, three lines, nothing crazy, to all of my, what I would call them, the risk committee, and I update them, tell them, if I need action needed, then I put in the subject action needed. FYI, I put in the subject FYI. And I send them saying, here is an incident, here is the scope as of now. I'll let you know, nothing is needed from your part. And that's it. So what the issue is, what's the impact, and what has it been affecting? And what do I need back from them? Nothing. If I need something, then I'll say, please respond with this at this. I mean, if I need them to go and conduct a survey or something, or research something and come back to us, then I will say, Mr. Attorney, Mr. General Counsel, please look into if we have any reporting requirements needed or something, or we have to report law enforcement or anything or notification. So that is, and you keep doing that regularly. First of all, it prepares the non-technical security officer that it's okay to have incidents, and incidents happen all the time. Because I don't want people in the organization that they always feel that they get this false sense of security because they're not hearing about incidents. This means they're safe and nothing is happening. And I think that's the biggest mistake. You would disadvantage yourself as a CISO also, because when something really happens, people are going to overreact. They will not be able to give it the right attention to the issue and be able to classify, okay, do I need to scream? Do I need to jump in? Do we need to call the police? Do we need to call the FBI, Secret Services? I mean, how big is this thing? So education, in my opinion, comes in by involving those periodical emails and announcements.
Chris, can I make a comment? I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone can at any time. That's our culture here.
I think there is a bigger issue, and I think it has to do with people compartmentalizing not just responsibility, also being disengaged from responsibility. I think in this new tech age, tech is so far ahead of the legal system and the people who are the so-called gatekeepers of the legal system, that the lawyers are always a little bit behind, and compliance never solves the problem. So I think we have to get to the place where we understand the mindset of our participants, the fact that people are really not engaged, or they don't feel responsible, they don't feel accountable. They just want to get to Facebook or get home and have a good time on television. And so the other thing is, with all this texting that's going on, people are living in their heads as opposed to being fully integrated with their emotions. And so even if you're talking to them about compliance or talking to them about lawyers and rules, they're not really taking it seriously, because they don't feel as if they're a stakeholder in the system. They get a paycheck, they go home. They don't, some of them don't see an acceleration path, or they're looking outside of their corporate structure for their soft landing somewhere else. They're always searching for a new job. So I think a lot of the problem, I'm going to say, is not legal, and it's not just security officers' problem. I think it's corporate culture. We have to get back to a corporate culture where people feel valued, where they feel safe, and where they feel that they matter. They can contribute to something which is going to help them and include them in the success of the enterprise. So the problem is, we're trying our best here, but I think we need to address bigger social corporate issues, because what's happening inside the corporation is really reflecting the wider systemic problem. Marketers don't really think much about privacy. GDPR, so what? I mean, it's like
They want to just work with big data and go to get those analytics done and worked out and send it to all these great companies that does big data.
It's just another risk factor. I may get caught, I may not get caught. So what, lawyers are just kind of spinning wheels, or so they think.
Well, maybe I agree that the corporate culture is a really important element, and you need leadership from the top to help build those bridges that Sally's talking about. And I think exacerbating the problem is the fact that both the legal and the technical parts of a company are on the cost side, so they don't get the attention of the CEO as much because they're often focused on the money side of things until
one thing we've actually been doing, there is a nice publication about corporate culture that it was actually a part of the NACD educational materials for board members and board directors. And I'm talking about corporate directors who sit on those Fortune 500 companies. And they're educating those directors and those board members on how the tone from the top influences the individual behaviors of people. That's absolutely true. And that risk appetite, really, an attitude towards risk. Yes, Kathy.
Yeah, so I agree with you. And I think the other thing to emphasize is that cybersecurity is a financial issue for a company. It's a reputational issue. And when you have a breach or you have a misuse of data, it really does affect the bottom line. And that's one thing that I know that the IT team that I've worked with and the data privacy teams and I sort of work together is to try to get that message up. It's since it's more in the papers lately, it's easier if you're a company that uses data a lot. But in, other companies, because our laws are different globally, it's more of a struggle to try and get to people to understand things like privacy by design and how that's a long-term approach for your long-term financial stability.
Yeah, I think if we were as old as the financial sector, where we, technology and security officers, have been trained to prepare risk assessments the same way that it's being done in credit risk and financial statements, where our board members can clearly see the line between this technology compliance and how it relates to the business stocks or the direct revenues of a certain line of business. When they can actually see this clear line, it actually would require a lot of education. Until then, we will struggle with educating both sides. The boards need to be able to understand how it relates to the business, and the technical folks need to understand the business better to articulate their technology and risk issues in a business language.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I really do. I think you're right. I think once we get there, it will be less of an issue.
Yeah, agreed. Yep.
Sally, how important are cybersecurity fire drills? I don't think you've mentioned those. That might be a less risky place to air issues than going through an actual crisis, and it might be a way to practice working together. I wanted to see what your views on how often those are done and whether those are effective.
No matter how much you think you're ready and how many times, the more you practice, the better. Think of this way. I don't know how many of you sail. I sail, so I'm going to use the example of sailing. The first thing that they do when they teach children, little children, like you could see them 9 and 10-year-olds, and as they're getting ready to sail, they put them in this pram. My son calls it the tub. No offense to anyone. And the first thing that they teach them before they get out on the water, obviously they have to know how to swim. That's a prerequisite. But when they're out in the water, the first thing that they do, they have to capsize and bring that boat back up. This is the first step that they teach them. I capsize almost every other time I sail, especially when it's in high wind. There is a high chance, 60% of the time I capsize. But every time when I capsize, I'm like, oh my God, I know what to do. I capsize, and my boat is obviously a little bit bigger, and I do that, and I'm used to bring it back up. But that adrenaline shock is always there. my recommendation, and what we've done, I developed a very nice exercise module that I share, and I also teach it in the university, what I would call the technical universities, that they want to graduate students who are ready to start on the job immediately as incident responders and security engineers. We have a 3.5-hour exercise, and it's a real simulation where the students are broken down to the general counselor, the HR, the risk officer, the chairman of the company, and few annoying people from the board. You know, they keep, no, really, and we call them annoying because at that moment, their job that they need to annoy, they need to be very mean, very, you know, really, they need to demonstrate stress on the executives and of course the security officer. And guess what? And during that exercise, they get hacked. This company starts leaking. Their websites are down. As they start communicating via email, the hacker takes their email down. So what else? How are they going to communicate? And, you know, stress level starts to escalate. And at that point, someone gets fired. That even, you know, adds more. First of all, they lost someone who has the knowledge. Okay. And so the thing goes further. And then what about the reporting? And then the news. And then we actually bring people, reporters, who start knocking on their doors, send them text. They find their personal phone numbers, they find their houses, we start emulating the exercise, and it becomes very stressful. A lot of the feedback I received from out of that exercise saying, no matter how much we thought we were ready, we're always trained on securing and putting in control, but we were never trained on what if those controls fail and we really get attacked. So we bring the annoying reporters, you know, they start putting all these, you know, and then you can see the stock exchange the stock starting getting, and all of that. And that whole dynamic environment puts the stress and kicks that adrenaline. I mean, I've done the exercise a few times, and believe it or not, every time I stress out. So yes, I highly recommend that people do such exercises at work.
Thank you, Sally. I have the unfortunate job of calling time here. We're 3 minutes over time, and so we need to conclude this wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. With the people that registered, I will send a PDF copy of Sally's Q&A with David, so you can see the nice PDF version. I'll include the link to the website so you can share it with your colleagues as well. Sally will be making an encore, but it will not be until 12:30. So if you go to inthehouse.org and click on events, you could also sign up for that additional. There'll be some overlap in the content, but I'm sure we'll have different questions. So if you want to attend that one as well, feel free. But thank you so much, Sally. I'd love to work with you again. And anyone that wants to get in touch with Sally, I'm easy to find, chris@inthehouse.org. Just email me. I'd be happy to do an email intro to Sally if you'd like to follow up with her one-on-one. So thanks, everybody. Hope to see you all again soon. And David and Sally, I'll see you at 12:30. Okay?
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Okay.